I'll be the first one to admit that calming your inner voice is not that easy, but there are things that you can do to help yourself and others to calm that inner critic when it's a little too harsh. Hey, this is Nestor Sumaya, and I'm a medical doctor with a master's in global mental health. Let's go through some things that you can do to calm your inner voice. I found some tips in the book Chatter by Ethan Kross. I think it's one of the best ways that I have seen in which someone explains actionable things that anyone can do. But first, let's talk about what's our inner voice. So, some people consider it the in-between between our thoughts and our actions. It's that time where you're talking to yourself in your head, or perhaps you're reading and you're processing information just in your head by yourself. It is said that it appears as a natural phenomenon by the age of 3, and it's a really important thing for things like self-identity, to understand who we are, to perform tasks like reading. But there are things that can go wrong with your inner voice, and the most frequent one is that we ruminate. That is, that we keep something that bothers us in our head so much that it makes us think that we are not capable of doing things, or perhaps that people think something about us that might not be real. So Ethan Kross calls it chatter, and that's the title of the book, Chatter by Ethan Kross. You're gonna see that these techniques are so simple that you might think they are a little silly, but when you think about it, they make sense. So number 1 is creating psychological distance. To create psychological distance, there are 3 things that we can do. Firstly, third person talk. That is no more than talking to yourself as if you were talking to someone else. For example, I could be feeling lazy to go out to the gym, so I would say to myself, hey Nestor, get to it. Or things as simple as saying, you can do it. As I say, this might seem simple, but it's proven that it works. And some studies show that when people feel distressed, this is a natural phenomenon that happens to all of us, and we recur to third person talk to pump ourselves up. A similar thing that you can do is imagine that you're talking to a friend that's going through the same situation as you, and what would you tell them? Now, it's important that you imagine that you're talking to someone that you care about, otherwise your advice might be quite generic. Imagine that you're talking to your mom or your best friend and catch yourself really thinking about that advice that you would give. You might realize that the answer is already in you, and that situation might not be as bad as you think of. Or if it is, you can come up with things to say that will calm your loved one. A third way of putting psychological distance between a specific situation and you is putting that situation in perspective with the current state of the world. For example, the argument that you had with your boss might not seem as important when you compare it to natural disasters that are going on, or some political issue that you're interested. Now, it's really important to be cautious with this, because your problems are real, but some people find that putting that specific situation in perspective makes it seem like less severe. The second technique that the book discusses is rephrasing things as a challenge. Of course, this will depend on your specific personality, as some people find challenges really appealing. For example, your boss asks you why are you being delayed with a certain task when your colleague delivered it 2 days ago, and some people might go, oh, I need to work faster, I know I can, and I'm gonna challenge myself and I'm gonna do it. But it's tricky because some other people will find the idea of a challenge overwhelming. So we're gonna come back a bit and see what we can do to identify what works for us. The third thing that the book recommends is noting your physical response. Let's say you're gonna give an important presentation, your heart starts to race, your palms get sweaty, and this is a good method to catch yourself before it gets too bad. And then fall back on some other technique, specifically rephrasing things as challenge. You can say, oh, my heart is racing, but I'm gonna use this energy to project my voice the best way as I can. Number 4 is a technique that's widely used by clinical psychologists, and it's called normalizing. Normalizing means that you make yourself aware that what you're going through is something that other humans go through as well. And that helps when we feel that the world is coming on us and we are alone fighting this inexplicable force. And when we understand that this is something that other humans go through, we may find in ourselves the strength to ask for help, or that might be enough to realize that someone else has gone through the exact same situation or similar situation, and they have pushed push through and accomplish their objectives. Number 5 is engaging in mental time travel. And this simply means imagining how things will be in the future. So if you're gonna have a tough discussion with a friend or a partner, you can imagine what the situation is gonna look in like 1 week, 1 year, and so on. And you might find that whatever you're feeling, you're not gonna be feeling next year. And that's important because regardless of the outcome of a specific situation, discomfort is not permanent. The self-doubt, the negative thoughts that you're having about yourself aren't gonna be with you in the same way as they are today. Number 6 is something that I bet we all have done, but the author gives some specific advice, and that's writing expressively. The author points out that it's really important that you forget about your grammar, your spelling, but also that you write at least for 15 to 20 minutes. I found that key to a successful journaling session. Number 7 is a bit controversial. It's the use of a lucky charm or superstition or some type of ritual. And you can see examples of this in athletes, for example, that position themselves in a specific way before a race, or that do a specific shaking movement. And you can do the same thing, for example, for a test. You can spin your pen a specific way, or you can carry something in your hand, or you can have a coffee with your friends at a specific spot and at a specific time right before an important event. Now, although I think these techniques overall seem like a good idea, there is something more important that I think we should consider. How do we help others when they are struggling with their inner voice? And I think there are 3 important aspects to this. First, I would say that it's really important that we practice validation. Again, that is explaining to our friends, to our loved ones, that what they're going through is something that is understandable, that they're struggling with this specific situation. Because it is hard, it is complicated, our inner critic can be too harsh, but it's also important that we give actionable advice. And with this, the intention is to cover their emotional needs with validation and their cognitive needs with a specific advice that might help their specific situation. Another one which I love is providing invisible support. So when we are giving unwanted advice, that can seem kind of intrusive, and it takes away the agency of that person to act on their needs. And what I mean by providing invisible support is helping with mundane tasks that just add to the mental burden of a person. For example, you can wash the dishes without being asked, you can do laundry without being asked, you can bring food without being asked, and those are things that will take care of the needs of your loved one so they can save that energy to take care of their other needs. And lastly, affectionate touch, whether it's a hug, putting your hand on the shoulder of someone. And with this, it's really important to remember that it's also okay to ask for a hug. More importantly, it doesn't have to be a real person. You can also hug a stuffed animal or another animal partner, and with that, you'll start a chemical reaction in your brain that will ease your anxieties. So to close that thing, the takeaway of all of these techniques is just to try and see what works for you, because not every situation is the same. And I think most important part is to try to remember these things and help others so that they can take care of us when we need it. Because when you're down, when you're struggling with something, it's really difficult to remember a list of 10 plus things that you might want to try. When you're okay and you're providing support, you can try to direct your loved one through these resources and see if they benefit from them. And I think that this is a really good way to start creating committees of people that can support your mental health in some ways that you know are helpful for you. And everyone develops skills to take care of the mental health of the community as a whole. So that's it for the recommendations that I wanted to highlight from this book, Chattered by Ethan Cross. You can find a link in the description, and also link a really interesting review from the American Psychological Association regarding our inner voice, the development, the function that it has, and some of the research that has been done on the area. So I hope you find this useful, and until next time.